What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to For the Millie. It just has to be said right away. Prop, can you take this guy seriously in this costume?
You cannot. When he first popped in the stage, I was caught off guard. I actually almost forgot it was Halloween. So
Well,
Yeah, me
anyone
too.
who knows what TV show I'm from.
You look like a bunny rabbit. I don't know.
I'm not a bunny rabbit. I'm a dog. I got the dog tail. It's a dog costume. I understand how people might think it's a bunny rabbit costume, but it is in fact a dog costume.
Okay.
So bonus points if you know which dog I am.
I do not.
Well,
Prop, do you?
the user can come up with it. We'll see. What the user comments, knowing where I got my dog costume from, gets a shout out or some other thing. I don't know.
Fair enough. Prop, I have to remind myself, this guy has won the Millie Maker 5 times on DraftKings, so maybe we should still take him seriously. Yeah. Let's see. We got a question in here. Is this just DFS? We are going to talk pick 'em picks. We're going to talk just all player props, so you can bet them. Sports books, underdog, price picks, wherever. We're going to talk pick 6 specifically, and we are going to talk both showdown and a little bit of the DraftKings main slate this coming week. So should be a great show. Prop, it is so nice to have you back. And TwoGun, pressure's on, my friend, because on Monday, Prop and I had a very successful show, especially over in the Pick'em streets. So I hope you're ready to bring the heat today in your dog costume, I guess, not a bunny rabbit costume.
Wolf, I don't know what to say. I'll do my best, you know.
There we go.
I feel like I'm getting replaced, but it's okay. I feel like Prop's like Alex's new wife, and I'm like the old wife. But like we're trying to make things work. But I think it's gonna be okay.
Well, if Alex had both of them in the same room, then Alex is winning, right?
I know.
Maybe Prop and I team up. We just kick Alex out. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how it works out in real life. Like you get the second wife, and you think like, oh, you know, I'm the man. I got both these girls, and then they gang up on you, and boom. That's how it works. Generally.
We're getting very off track. Let's jump in to some of our favorite picks. Prop, why don't you start us off? Do you have a favorite pick from tonight's game?
For tonight, yeah, I'm gonna go with John Mechie the third, over 16.5 receiving yards, minus 125 on DK. Alex, I know you like that as well. I just figure for Mechie, if not now, then when? This is the perfect opportunity for him. No Stephon Diggs for the rest of the season. No Nico Collins till week 10. Tank Dell will be wide receiver 1. So I think this is an opportunity for Mechie to show up. And it's probably good that the Texans, you know, he was in some trade talks coming into the season. They held on to him. And now they could look like geniuses if he comes out and performs well. We've seen this Jets secondary struggle. I know they've been banged up. The safeties have kind of been subpar for New York this season. So I think with C.J. Stroud at quarterback, he can make any receiver look good. So I'm interested to see what Mechie does tonight. I'm honestly tempted to take this line up to 40 yards just because of the value that we're getting. He had 29 yards last week. Now you had a full week of being prepped to be in the mix at wide receiver 2. So I think he's good to roll.
Yeah, I love this call. One thing I'll point out, because Diggs played a lot of last game, Mechie only ran 8 routes, still was targeted 4 times, caught 3 of those for 29. So when you look at what Mechie has been able to do in limited opportunity versus Hutchinson, Robert Woods have done with slightly more opportunity, it really seems like of those 3, Mechie is the most likely to actually produce tonight. So I'm with you. I think the 16.5 number is way too low. And I love the idea of laddering him all the way up to 40.
Yes, sir.
TwoGun, how do you feel about Mechie? And maybe you have any other thoughts on these Texans receivers?
You know, I went into today. Okay, Mechie's not on pick 6 yet, but he is on showdown. And going into today, I kind of like Hutchinson more, but I'm starting to think maybe it's just because he was out on the field more. And I kind of like Prop's point. It's like Mechie was he was a much higher draft pick, and he just kind of had some health issues and stuff. Like he's probably the best talent outside of Tank Dell. So if you're going to go for that cheap wide receiver, or you're going to try to get like I don't know if he pops up on pick 6 or not, but if you're going to go for that cheap wide receiver in showdown, he's probably the way to go.
Yeah,
over the others. I might like swap about like some Hutchinson, some like, you know, mess with it a little here and there.
Yeah, TwoGun, to your point there, Hutchinson did run 25 routes last week, 1 target, 1 reception, 19 yards. Again, Mechie had 8 routes. Robert Woods also only had 8 routes, 2 targets, 18 yards on those 2 receptions. Very interesting. Hutchinson was kind of the guy on the field, but he was actually outproduced by each of these 2 guys. Hutchinson was just more so running wind sprints all game, but certainly it will look different with Diggs off the field. Obviously, like a lot of the time that meant that Hutchinson was running routes as probably even the 4th target behind Dalton Schultz as well, in addition to Dellin Diggs. So when Mechie and Robert Woods were on the field, there oftentimes was no step on Diggs. So definitely a point that has to be made, but completely agree here on Mechie's just kind of value overall, right? I think the 16.5 number is too low. I think he's probably being overlooked a little bit on Showdown. And I really like the idea, because Hutchinson has been on the board all day on pick 6, what I'm hoping is Mechie will eventually get added to the board, and then we can take a more on Mechie and use that to leverage Hutchinson and even take the less on Hutchinson's 20.5 receiving yards. So definitely something I'm going to be looking out for over the next few hours over on pick 6. All right, TwoGun, do you have a favorite pick from tonight's game?
Yeah, in general, in both pick 6 and in Showdown, I'm on the Mixon unders. What Mixon has done in the last 3 weeks is definitely amazing, and congrats to him. But I don't view it as sustainable. And my guess is the Jets are going to key on him and just kind of make sure it doesn't really happen for this game. So that's kind of where I'm at. I like the mix. I think he's going to be. People are kind of pricing him into the pass game far more than he will be. So I actually like his rush reception yards under, which is 109.5. That's just a shit ton of yards.
Yeah.
That's just a lot of yards for a good Jets team that's favored. People have to remember the Jets are favored. Mm-hmm. Everyone's kind of looking at this game like the Texans are favored by 3 points. But no, the Jets are favored by 2 points. Generally, when a team is favored, the other team just can't run it down their throats. I mean, maybe they will, but they probably won't. I think they're going to force C.J. Stroud to pass, and he actually might do just fine. But I just don't think it's going to be a mixing game.
Yeah, I like this call. And to your point, like I think one of the reasons why his rushing production to this point has been unsustainable, 400-plus yard games in 5 weeks, is look at the total carries. He's already had a game with 30 and 2 with 25 carries. That type of volume is just very rare in today's day and age. And it's especially rare in games where you are trailing. And so to your point, TwoGun, this is probably like one of the games that Houston's actually most likely to trail that they've played all season. 2 games against Indianapolis that were neutral scripts pretty much throughout, but they kind of went into the game expecting to have the lead. And so, they were playing a bit of a ball control game, and then a 20-point victory over New England, and another one of those like just neutral game scripts all game long against the Packers where they lost by 2. So I'm very much with you here on the mix and unders. I will say I think I like it more on pick 6 when I feel like I'm getting some leverage against the overs than I do just taking the under itself. But where do you think
I always, I feel like we all, like I do more pure like I do contests more than like prop does. Prop does more prop bets, right? Mm-hmm. So he's like more focused on, is this going to win? And I'm more focused on if I win, is everyone else going to lose? Whereas I'm not like so focused on everyone. I'm just more of a hater at heart, right? Because I need everyone else to lose. Whereas if you're just betting the prop, you don't need everyone else to lose. If they win too, who cares? But in terms of something that I think will be popular on the other side that I just don't like on both ways, I like mix. I basically like fading Mixon from a contest standpoint. I do like it from a pure betting standpoint too. I think he's just overvalued, but from a contest standpoint, especially, I think people are going to just hit the Mixon over, or at least be afraid of the Mixon under.
Prop, how do you feel about the Mixon under just as its own pick?
Ooh, I almost forgot I was muted. So I figured you guys were going to go that way. So when I was prepping for the show, I was thinking the same thing. That would be my what you guys call it, the leverage play.
Yep.
I would say, it's the way of pretty much fading the public, the way we did with Neighbors. That under ended up working out for us. The Pickens under didn't work, but the under on receptions and over on yards did work. Kind of what we discussed. So I think with Mixon, with that number being steamed up, this is the highest his line has been all season, I want to say. And now we know how bad the Jets' rush defense has been. But if I was going into a contest like you guys, I would agree with taking the under just to be on the opposing end of what the public is on.
Yeah, I've made this point before on the show, but I always get a little bit worried about taking overs on rushing yards solely because of the matchup. Because if there's one aspect of defense that a team can address simply by choosing to address it, it is stopping the run, because so much of stopping the run is just committing extra guys into the box. And so I think, especially when you take out a team's top two wide receivers in Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, that gives the team the license that they maybe need to put that extra safety in the box over and over and over again. So I really like this play from a leverage standpoint, and I honestly still would lean under, even on underdog or prize picks or on a sports book as well for the player prop, but really like this on pick 6. All right, I'm going to go to.
It's so high. The number's so high. People may not be taking the over that much. 110 yards on that's just a big number. But I just like the under period.
I will say, I know a few hours ago I saw it was at 81.5. So there are still people taking the over, but I do agree now that it is at 82.5, it might not be the most popular. But if you take the less than and he finishes at 60, that means that everyone who was taking it at 81.5 and maybe even at 80.5, if it existed there at all, they're still losing. So you're still leveraging all of those picks as well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think about Tank Dell over 0.5 rushing yards, just to get him, just to find more ways to get him the football, and he can't be explosive. And we are talking about, the Jets struggling to stop the run. I could see Tank Dell at least getting a couple yards. I think he hasn't ran the ball in a few weeks now.
He had 2 carries in week 1, 19 yards, 3 carries in week 2 for 16. So it was very much a part of what they were doing. I don't know about you, Prop, but I'm worried that the rush attempts have gone away. Number 1, because he was battling an injury, and number 2, because in week 1 and 2 he was the wide receiver 3. Then Nico Collins got hurt, and suddenly he's the wide receiver 2/wide receiver 1, and now he's the very clear wide receiver 1. So I like the thought of they want to get him the ball. They want to get him involved in whatever way they can. But I am a little bit concerned that they just feel like he's too precious and too fragile now to give him those types of carries that are almost guaranteed to lead to a hard hit.
Yeah, I get that angle too. I just was throwing it out there because I just seen the line. I saw it was plus money. But he also
plus money, I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's plus 124 on Bet365.
Cool. Let's see. Do they have him on underdog? Because they might have a multiplier on that. Yeah, 1.09x on his rushing yards. Same. So I like it more just in the player prop market. What did you say it was plus 124?
Yep.
Yeah, I like that quite a bit. More so than the 1.09x. You can pretty much draw a 1-to-1 comparison there. And so obviously plus 124 is better than 1.09x. All right, my favorite pick from tonight's game, Aaron Rodgers over 33.5 pass attempts. I feel like this one's honestly pretty straightforward. Houston, really good defending the run. They're 6th in adjusted line yards allowed. New York has basically not been able to run the ball effectively against anybody. They had a good game on the ground against Buffalo. It's been a concern for Buffalo, but any thought that the Jets just figured out their run blocking was kind of thrown out the window a week ago. And on top of that, Houston also prevents deep passes. They've allowed the 9th fewest deep completions in the league. So this tells a pretty clear story to me. A high pass rate for New York, and they're not going to be able to throw it deep. A lot of short passes trying to just generate sustained drives that way, which leads to a lot of pass attempts. So I really like the Aaron Rodgers over 33.5 pass attempts here.
You're saying 2 things. He's going to throw it short, and he's going to be inefficient with his throws. Both of which kind of make sense.
Yeah, and not just having to be inefficient, but he can complete a lot of those passes because they're not going to be for chunk gains. But I think the other thing is, and we've seen both this Jets team do it a lot, and we've seen Aaron Rodgers' Green Bay team do it a lot in the past, where when they can't run the ball, they don't say, all right, let's figure out a way to run the ball and let's be stubborn about it. They say, okay, let's create like an extension of the running game with quick passes. Breece Hall has done a phenomenal job of that. Like we just saw that a couple games ago as well, where they just said, all right, if we're not going to run the ball, we're just going to throw it to Breece every single play. And yeah, against Pittsburgh, only 12 carries, 3.2 yards per carry, but he had 9 targets, 103 receiving yards. So we could very much see that sort of approach as well. And in that game, Rodgers threw the ball 39 times. And like I said, Breece Hall only 12 rush attempts. So you can pair this with Breece Hall under 15.5 rushes, which I think is a solid idea. But I like the Rodgers on over 33.5 pass attempts regardless. What do you think of this prop?
I like it, and it kind of goes into what I was looking at because I wanted to do something like a same game parlay for this one. So I was thinking of Adams. I like Adams a lot tonight, so I was thinking of maybe him for 4 to 5 receptions, probably 5, and then putting Garrett Wilson on there for like 40+ yards. I didn't get the exact odds for that, but I could see the short passing game being effective for the Jets tonight. So I'm with you there on the passing attempts for Rodgers.
I like that. Here's an interesting question for you guys. And actually, I do have an answer for it, but I'm curious your thoughts first. When we use the DVOA adjusted fantasy points against tool, we see that Houston is a bad matchup for opposing wide receiver ones, negative 30%, but a fairly solid matchup for wide receiver twos, plus 8%. When looking at Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson, Prop, I'll start with you. Who do you view as the wide receiver one now on the Jets?
Honestly, I would still look at Garrett Wilson. Name wise, of course, it's going to be Adams, but since Adams has been there, Wilson has continued to eat. He's went over 100 yards in 3 straight games. Yeah. Looking at the targets, Adams, he's been there since the Pittsburgh game. So he had 9 targets against Pittsburgh, 6 against the Patriots. Then if you go to Garrett Wilson, where's Garrett?
Yeah, 100+ in 3 of the last 4. And he's been targeted like crazy too. Like even since Adams has come, 9 targets, 8 in the last 2 games, and has been the more efficient of the two. TwoGun, do you have any takes here?
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's just not a great comparison. Like it's just not great for this matchup because I think they're so close to like 1A, 1B.
Mm-hmm.
That like I think you're overthinking it. I think it's better. Question is who's going to get shorter passes? Like who's better for short passing routes? Than of the two. I mean, honestly, they're both probably pretty good though. So let
me see.
I'm checking the stats right now to see their ADOT.
That's what I'm doing as well.
I'll look at the ADOT.
Yeah.
But I just think I think this Jets team basically has 3 playmakers. They have Breece Hall, Davante Adams, and Garrett Wilson, and everyone else can just go suck it. And I don't know what to say. Like flip a coin if you want. You could flip a coin between the two, realistically.
I do like that call, TwoGun, and Adams is the one with the lower average depth of target this season. He's also has the lower average depth of target since he came to the Jets. One thing I will say that, it's low. It's low. I was actually chatting earlier with Aaron Schatz about this. He's the one who does all of this DVOA adjusted fantasy points against data, and he had a really interesting answer to this question, which was he looked at how the Patriots defended them and saw that Christian Gonzalez was pretty much shadowing Davante Adams the whole time, which to us, that signals that they viewed Davante Adams as the wide receiver one. And so much of this DVOA adjusted fantasy points against data is about how teams approach wide receiver one versus wide receiver 2 and their defensive tendencies, defensive philosophies. So from that perspective, I do think there's something to be said that Houston might try to scheme out Davante Adams more than they do Garrett Wilson. But just because that's how New England approached it last week doesn't mean that Houston's going to share that same thought. And maybe they think that Garrett Wilson is the more dangerous of the two and try to scheme him out. So I think I'm with you here, TwoGun, largely that it's really kind of hard to tell. And they're such similar players in so many ways, just outstanding route runners. They can get open quickly. They can win deep, but they can also win short. And so I don't want to overthink it from that perspective, but I also would just kind of reiterate the fact that Garrett Wilson has been more effective and of the two, he's more likely to be categorized in that wide receiver 2 bucket, which means he might be the more effective and have the better matchup. So when looking at the two, I would rather bet on Garrett Wilson today.
Yeah, that was my initial thoughts too. Rocking out with Wilson, but I do. That's why I think it could be something where Adams gets his receptions, but maybe not the yards. But I also could see Adams going off. I can see it 2 different ways. Because I mean, what are y'all thoughts on the game? Are you expecting a low scoring game? Are y'all expecting the total to go over? Because that could tell a story too.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would expect a fairly low scoring game. One thing I'll note here on pick 6, Davante Adams opened at 58.5. He's up to 60.5. Garrett Wilson has stayed at his original 61.5 number. So I'm not surprised that those guys have kind of come together, and it basically shows like nobody knows who should be the alpha, if you will, between the two. And so it makes sense that they would come together. So I kind of like the idea of going over on Garrett Wilson on pick 6 with an under on Davante Adams. And to your point, Prop, if we are expecting a lower scoring game with not a ton of offense, I think that brings in a really strong correlation between an over on one of these guys and an under on the other. So how do you feel about that strategy, TwoGun?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said TwoGun. Go ahead. My bad.
I mean, I like doing over on one, under on the other. If you're not messing around with, generally, if you're not messing around with Aaron Rodgers, because it's not really correlated to either. I tend to like unders on this game more so on pick 6 than I do on like showdown, because showdown is hard to like gear your lineup toward an under.
Yeah,
because it's like, oh, you can do kickers and defense, but you'd be surprised how that doesn't really work.
Because for kickers especially, you need the offenses to drive the ball successfully, right? They have to get themselves into field goal range, and so it's kind of tough to say I don't expect efficient offense, and yet they're going to end up in field goal range enough for the kickers to actually have a bunch of field goal attempts and not just 1 or 2.
Right, and if this game ends up being 14-17, kickers and defenses could be garbage, but the under hits. But the unders on the pick 6 hit. So I tend to think of that. I am definitely hitting the unders more on pick 6. Let's leave it at that. Our pick 6 tool likes the unders.
Yep.
That's how I'm approaching pick 6. That's not how I'm approaching showdown. Showdown, I'm thinking in completely different ways. I'm just mix and fade and stuff like that with that. But I do like the unders in general more on pick 6.
Prop, how do you feel about that strategy of taking the over on one and the under on the other Jets stud receiver?
I think it's probably going to end up. That's what's happened the first 2 weeks we've seen them together. Garrett Wilson has had 100 yards in both games, and Adams has went under his baseline in both games. I think so. We can see that trend continue. I know at some point the Adams and Rodgers connection should click again, but that also has something to do with that offensive line. The offensive line has played bad as well for the Jets. So I'm not mad at that for tonight. If you're saying to take a Wilson over and Adams under, or the same way we did again, what about an Adams over receptions and under on yards? Something like that.
Yeah, I think that could very much be in play too. We mentioned it already, just a 6.7 average depth of target so far with New York. So if he's going to be targeted on those really short throws, kind of crazy, by the way, he has such a low average depth of target, and he's still only caught 7 of 15 of his targets. So I think a lot of us just kind of expected that as soon as Adams was back with Rodgers, that the chemistry would be there. It seems like it's taking them some time to develop that once again. I also want to ask, Houston has been a great matchup for all other wide receivers. So wide receiver 3, as a lot of you already know, when you're looking at the DVOA, adjusted fantasy points against data, that wide receiver 3 category applies to all other wide receivers, not just whoever that third wide receiver is. So we saw Gibson get a little bit involved last week for New York, caught a 1-yard touchdown, but mostly it's still been Mike Williams running those routes. Do you guys think that he can bounce back from a 0 reception, 0 target game a week ago and actually do something tonight?
No.
How about you, Prop?
I've been burned a couple times with Mike Williams, so I'm kind of the same way with him that I am with Pat Fryermuth at this point. I'm tired of losing money on those guys. So until I see them do something, then I'm good on it.
You warned me on Monday about Fryermuth too, by the way.
Yeah,
Mike Williams is going to suddenly matter. I think there's something wrong. I think he's kind of injured. I just think there's something wrong. He's just not right. We haven't seen a big game out of him.
Yeah.
I just think there's something wrong.
I agree. I know a lot of the kind of discourse around it has been that Rodgers just lost trust in him, and so he's not even looking his way. I think it's worth noting that in their last game, the matchup with New England, great matchup for wide receiver ones, great matchup for wide receiver twos, terrible matchup for wide receiver threes, which isn't because it's difficult for wide receiver threes against them. It's just that teams have all the success in the world targeting their wide receiver one and wide receiver two, so they don't need to go to that third wide receiver. Houston has kind of funneled production to that wide receiver three. So I'm not so much saying that Mike Williams is going to be relevant in showdown, but pick six, his number's only 17.5 yards. He can get there with one reception. Like we saw
these under 20-yard guys, it's hard to ever bet against them.
Yeah.
Unless you just really feel like being different. Like no one's going to click the Mike Williams under, right?
Right.
That doesn't mean you need to click the Mike Williams over unless you really like Mike Williams. Like, let's just say they have a John Mechie over, and we talked about liking him. Yeah. Just because I'm clicking the John Mechie over, though, doesn't mean I really want to say click the Hutchinson under or the Mike Williams under. That's kind of how I feel about pick six props. Which is funny because you think I'd like to take the one that no one else takes, but I just feel like there's enough stuff out there that you don't really have to go there, and it's just not correlated with anything, right? Like, Mike Williams, 17.5 yards just doesn't matter because he's not going to get 100 yards. He's not going to push Aaron Rodgers over his, right? Like, maybe he gets 25. Maybe he gets 30. Either way, it doesn't affect Aaron Rodgers. Unless you just really want to, like, overthink it and take, like, a Garrett Wilson under with it, I don't think so.
All right, guys. On Monday, Prop and I gave an official 3-pick play of For the Millie, and it hit. So we might as well try to make it back-to-back shows with a 3-pick play hit over on Underdog. I think we're pretty clear on the start. We want John Mechie higher than 16.5 receiving yards. I will nominate Rodgers higher than 33.5 passing attempts. From there, I think we have multiple places we can go. We can go to the mix and under, or we could say that's a better pick six play than underdog play, and maybe we look to the Breece Hall rush attempts. What do you think here, TwoGun?
Okay, if we're talking, say, an underdog where they penalize you for correlating and being smart, then I actually like the Joe Mixon under because you're not going to get penalized because those three have really nothing to do with each other.
And to your point, if you go to the lower 15.5 rushing attempts, it's 1.04x. But instead of the standard 6x payout that you would get for a 3-pick play, it drops to 5.42x because, as you said, there is a correlation penalty. What do you think here, Prop? Do you have a strong lean on a third pick?
No. What are they offering? Are they offering the juice line on Garrett Wilson's receptions over 4.5, or is it at 5.5?
It is 5.5, 1.11x. We would also get just 61.5 receiving yards. Prop, I know you've been hitting a lot of first quarter stuff. His first quarter receiving yards is only 10.5. If we want to do something like that as well.
I think he's been covering that a lot. Let's see. In the first, no, not a lot. Well, he's averaging 15 yards a game in the first quarter, but 10.5, he is over in 4 out of 8 games.
We also have 8.5 targets for each of these guys. And actually, what I should do real quick is I should check what kind of correlation penalty we would be getting with any of the stuff with the passing attempts. So, like, if we just went to the 61.5 receiving yards, that's a no-go. It goes all the way down to 5.04x. If we went just the first quarter number, it only drops to 5.7x. So I still don't love that, but it's definitely a lot better.
What about Joe Mixon? My guy Dill just texted me. I've ran him a lot in the first quarter, over 0.5 receiving yards. He's over he only missed in the Green Bay game. I'm mad at the under on his yard still, but for him to get 1 yard in the first quarter with how depleted they are in the receiver room, I like that.
It's also 1.06x. So what do you think of that one, TwoGun?
Well, that seems kind of like, so all he needs is one catch.
Yeah, 1 yard. Yep.
One receiving yard,
and you're getting plus money for it.
They offer that plus money every week. I've betted it every week. Besides, I want to say the first week maybe.
It's first quarter only, right? So you run into a potential scenario where
his pick six line is 20.5 receiving yards, which I like the under for.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's going to probably have a catch or two. So
yeah, I think
I definitely would lean towards the over for the first quarter, unless there's just something I don't understand here.
I think the danger with this kind of play is that there's the potential that New York starts with the ball and they open on like an 8-minute touchdown drive, right? Or an 8-minute field goal drive. Doesn't really matter.
Right. Like, so, I don't know much about football theory. Is there more running back screens and passes in the second half?
If anything, I would almost assume there's more early, because you would think like so many teams, what they do is they script like the first 15 play calls, right? And so I would almost assume you have like a well-designed screen pass as part of that script, more likely than you're randomly calling it in the middle of the third quarter. On the other hand, Mixon's more likely to catch like a dump-off pass, maybe in the 2-minute drill or something. But even then, like that's when Ogunbowale is on the field a lot of the time. So
yeah, I just don't. I mean, it seems like what's the catch? Because like
so like
I like the over. Even though I like Mixon unders, I like the over, but like, what's the catch? My little dog ears were like,
Prop. You seem to be saying that you've been using this pick a lot this year and it's been successful.
Yeah, all running backs like Eckler, he's a receiving back. They'll give him at plus 162. The receiving back from Baltimore, he's more risky because you got Derrick Henry. What's his name? Justice Hill. But they off James Cook. He's crushed that number all season. I think Cook has missed it in like 2 games. But some of these guys, I just bet it every week. Mixon is averaging two targets per game over the last 4 weeks in the first quarter. So they're getting him going early, and I expect it to be a little bit more now with him being pretty much at full health and them missing guys. But yeah, with the running backs, it could be it's risky, of course, because the first quarter can just go by, or he can catch a screen and lose yards, and then he doesn't catch a pass to the second quarter. So it is risky with it being the first quarter, but it's been great for me so far.
And to your point there, like just because it's risky in the sense that you feel like you could end up losing this, not because he's not involved, but because they just don't have the ball and that feels unlucky. At the end of the day, this is all probability, and this seems like a really high probability play, and we're getting an extra payout with that 1.06x. So I think with that, the official 3-pick play for the Millie, John Mechie higher than 16.5 receiving yards, Joe Mixon higher than 0.5 first quarter receiving yards, and Aaron Rodgers higher than 33.5 passing attempts. Hopefully we can make it 2 in a row.
I get kicked out. Prop gets 2. I get 0.
Oh yeah, see, nope. Don't make me the bad guy.
And Dream, I'm a dog. I'm a dog. I'm sorry. Dog tail.
Oh, they would drop. They thought you were an elephant in the chat. You see the elephant?
I'm a dog from a TV show about 10 years ago. Does anyone here know what I'm? Anyone? All I see on the stream is people talking about how like elephants and goats. I'm guessing for prop, and no one knows what dog I am. I don't know how I feel about this.
Dream is also saying you should have dressed up as a goat instead of a dog. By the way,
I have a dog outfit. I don't have a goat outfit.
I'm not sure you have a dog outfit because what you're wearing looks a hell of a lot more like an elephant. Or
if you watch the show, you would know I'm a dog.
What? Yeah.
I'm not Eeyore. I mean, I look like it. I'm Wilfred. People, Wilfred. Look at the show. I'm Wilfred the dog. I mean, I get a cigarette. I'm a cool dog. I like smoke cigarettes and get high, and I'm part of this guy's. Anyways,
this is such a good call. You look way more like Eeyore than whoever this Wilfred character is.
I don't have to do it with people.
All right, TwoGun. Maybe the reason why you didn't get an underdog pick is because you are our pick 6 specialist. I just saw you had a major 46x hit on pick six, even in the NBA streets last night. For someone who doesn't know anything about NBA, all you did was use the tool. So that's a pretty awesome hit. Congratulations on that. And I'll let you start us off here on pick six tonight. What we always like to do is kind of tell a story through the lineup. We like to leverage what everybody else is doing. I think I already know your answer, but where would you like us to start with our pick six build?
Yeah, I'll point out, like, you know, I feel like NBA pick six really hits home how the payouts are better on DraftKings, right? Like I got a 45x there. If that was on a Prize Picks or Underdog, I would have gotten like 25x, probably, something like that. And it's pretty common because it's just so much harder to hit six on pick six because it's tougher to correlate. People don't know how to correlate. So tonight on pick six, like I said, I tend to be doing stacking. I often like the Joe Mixon under, right? And I'll sometimes go with that Joe Mixon under and go with just an under in general, where I take an Aaron Rodgers passing yards under, which our pick six tool loves, and then I'll choose a few guys to go with that. And then you have yourself a pick four generally already there, and you can call it a day or whatever.
Do you
or I go with pick four and I go with CJ Stroud over.
Sorry, say that again.
Or if I want to go for a more high volume passing game, I'll go with a Joe Mixon under, CJ Stroud over, and then some sort of over on the Jets side. It doesn't have to be Aaron Rodgers. It might be just a Devontae Adams over, but some sort of, more on the Jets side to basically be pushing the idea is you're pushing the Jets are pushing the Texans to throw the ball. They're not going to just run it with Mixon. CJ Stroud's going to throw the ball. So those are the two game plans I like. One is a boring ass. This game just terrible. There's no throwing. There's no running. Nothing. Or the Jets are pushing the Texans, so they're both at least trying to throw the ball. And they're just not going to get the ball done on the ground with Mixon. Those are the two themes I'm going with on pick six.
Do you have a preference between Mixon under 82.5 rushing yards and under 109.5 rushing plus receiving yards?
In the first scenario, I probably go with under 109.5. In the second scenario, I'm just using the rushing yards. But I think probably a lot of my lineups were too sloppy to where I thought that through because I've been in the dog outfit for the past few hours.
All right, Prop, do you have a preference between those two? Would you rather go under on just the rushing yards or the rushing plus receiving yards?
I would throw the combo in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I would throw the combo just to get that little boost.
I just don't buy that they're going to throw the ball to Mixon that much. Like, I just don't see that. Like, they'll probably use Dalton. I like Dalton Schultz a lot. He's one of my favorite plays of the night is Dalton Schultz.
Yeah.
Not so much in pick six, but definitely in DFS. Yeah. But I definitely like Dalton Schultz a lot. He's due for a touchdown. I think he's going to be a major. I think he's going to be more of a beneficiary than Joe Mixon is in the passing game.
Mixon has had 3, 5, 3, 3, and 6 targets in the 5 games he's played. So pretty consistently involved there. But he's only gone over, let's see, that would be a 27.5 twice. So the difference there between his rushing and receiving, it does seem like it should maybe not be quite that high. And like we talked about already, like Ogunbowale, I think gets really involved when they're in more obvious passing situations. So those Mixon receptions are often scripted, like screen passes, things of that nature. Ogunbowale not putting up the same numbers over the last few weeks as he was earlier, but still seeing the field, a lot of obvious passing situations. They just haven't had as many in the last couple weeks. I will note, by the way, we were waiting for it, and we got our wish. John Mechie now available on pick 6 at 18.5 receiving yards. So
now I got to get even more pick centuries done, right?
There you go. Yeah. So how do you guys feel? I kind of brought this up earlier, just kind of hoping it would show up. Now that it's there, do you guys like the over on Mechie 18.5 with an under on Hutchinson's 20.5? I'll start with you, Prop.
Well, yeah, I definitely like the Mechie over because I like them up to 40 yards. So I'm good with the I'm good with the Mechie look for sure. And I'm not mad at the under. You can't. What did you describe it as that he ran last week?
It's 25 routes last week, so he's not really going to see an increase in routes run at all. Maybe he'll see like an extra 5 or something, but 1 target, 1 reception, 19 yards was Hutchinson last week. Now, he's had games where he's done more than that. It's not like that's the only reception he's ever had or anything like that. But I do think it goes to show that and actually, I looked back at his yards per out run in each of the last 2 seasons as well. He's way behind Mechie in yards per out run. Tonight, I think they will probably run a similar number of routes. 1 target, 1 reception, 11 yards against Green Bay. 0 receptions on 2 targets against New England. So he's been running a lot of wind sprints lately without a lot of production. TwoGun, how do you feel about that? Do you like the Mechie over on its own, or do you like it in paired with this Hutchinson under more?
No, I like it more just as a more.
Okay.
And not really paired with anything. The only thing I really like it paired with is maybe a CJ Stroud, General Moore, which, you know, like if he gets 30 yards, it doesn't matter that much, or 40 yards, it doesn't matter that much. But I think I like it more as just I want to call it a one-off, but let's try not to overthink the correlation.
I think one thing that might be nice is because you really like the unders on Mixon, changing Mixon's rushing plus receiving to just under on the rushing yards paired with a Stroud over on passing yards and a Mechie over on receiving yards. I think that would be a really strong correlated.
Right. Another way to do it is a Stroud over on passing yards with Mechie and say Dalton Schultz. That is not going to be a common combination. A Stroud 3-person combo is common. Those 2 guys, not common.
Yep.
So that's what I kind of like. And then what do you want to bring it back with? Probably Moore's on the other side. But, you know, you can pick and choose, really.
Yeah. On pick 6 prop, do you still want to go with the over on Garrett Wilson, under on Devontae Adams? Personally, like I think it might be even better on pick 6 than elsewhere, just because we have seen Adams' number rise, so we know that people are taking Adams overs at a higher rate than they're taking Wilson over, since Wilson's number has stayed the same.
Yeah. If I had a preference between the two, it'll be Garrett with the over. Now I don't love Adams under, because I don't think I've ever played a under on Devontae Adams, even though we've seen how it's been the last couple of weeks. But I know that's how you win big, like TwoGun, right? You take those risks on fading guys like Devontae. But I more so love the over on Garrett than me loving the under on Adams.
I agree, and I think it's worth reiterating, like what we're trying to do here is not just win a 25x payout for a 6 or 6. We're not even just trying to win a 50x payout. We have seen 100x payouts. We have seen 400x payouts in some of these island games. And of course, some strange things need to happen for that to actually occur, but they're not going to happen so infrequently that they should be priced at 400x. So if we can find that 400x payout, we have incredible value. So that's why we're trying to find that contrarian path to what's going to happen. If all we did was pick things that we expect to happen and they all hit, guess what? We're probably getting like 15x payout or 25x at the most, not these really big payouts. So worth reiterating. But I would also say, like, in that regard, this is where I get really tempted by the Mike Williams number, because, man, like what happens if Mike Williams is actually more involved than we expect and has this like 4-catch, 60-yard game, and when they're throwing, he's actually been a major target. And therefore, you could see something like Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams going under. Maybe it's a big Breece Hall game. It's like Breece Hall and Mike Williams are doing all of the producing.
Yeah, that's where you get the big payouts too. You don't necessarily have to choose Mike Williams more. You just have to be cognizant of that there's a route to an Aaron Rodgers more, and both a Devontae Adams and a Garrett Wilson less.
Yeah. And I think, like, let me get the exact numbers, but I really noticed that despite all the talk that Aaron Rodgers maybe just lost trust in Mike Williams is still running routes. I think if Rodgers really had completely lost faith in Mike Williams, we would be seeing more Gibson. We would be seeing Malachi Corley get some more snaps. Like Corley only ran 2 routes last week, Gibson 4. It was Mike Williams every other time. So I still think that Williams was more a product of the matchup last week. We saw him make a big 3rd down conversion the week prior. Rodgers even shouted him out in the post game, talking about that big reception. So I don't know, man. I just have this like weird feeling that Mike Williams is going to surprise people tonight. And while I want no part of that on Underdog or PrizePicks or Sportsbooks, Pick 6 is the perfect place to play that
right.
type of game.
Pick 6 more so than even Showdown,
right?
Because it's so low and he screws up other popular stacks, right? Like you go with Aaron Rodgers more, and like with Mike Williams and Tyler Conklin, or even just Mike Williams, or you know what I'm saying? Like that is just not a popular 3-pick set that is very correlated. And then you just kind of hope that Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson don't hit.
Yeah. Any other thoughts here on Pick 6, PropGod?
No, nothing else for me. I did want to get some type of action with Dalton Schultz too, though. I know TwoGun mentioned him, but nothing else as far as the Pick 6.
Yeah, he's all the way up at 40.5 on Pick 6. Did have 52 receiving yards last week, so no surprise to see that he was more involved once those guys went down. But all right, let's talk some Showdown. And where I want to start is Caleb's article, because if you haven't read Caleb's Showdown breakdown over on ftnfantasy.com, I highly recommend it. And one thing I really want to point to is this section where we talk about how many Texans versus how many Jets and what the simulations really like. And I think Caleb made a phenomenal point where our simulations are saying to build Texans heavy lineups. And a lot of the time we would think of that as the simulation saying that the Texans are going to win the game or at least have more offensive production. But I think Caleb made the awesome point in his article that sometimes it just tells us about the concentration of production on each team. And in this case, we have a lot of these like super cheap Texans receivers. Stroud can spread out the ball. Maybe it's Schultz and Mechie and Dell and Mixon. And then on the other side, maybe the offense is completely concentrated for New York, where Garrett Wilson's having a big day and stealing from everybody else, or Adams is doing that, or of course, Breece Hall is doing that as he has done a bunch. So TwoGun, do you feel kind of the same way that Caleb does, that you want to be higher on Houston tonight just because of how spread their production can be?
Not at first, but I'm starting to move towards that direction. I think I'm generally a little bit more Jets heavy just because I think the Jets are underloved in this game compared to the Texans. But I'm starting to think you just throw Mechie in your lineups as your, and that doesn't take much salary, and it just adds a Texan, right? And the other thing is, do you really want to have like Devontae Adams, Breece Hall, and Garrett Wilson all in the lineup?
Yeah,
maybe not. Like that's just too much production. Like you just have to guess one or two of those skill players and then leave the other one out of it, because the chance of the Jets going that apeshit crazy on offense is just so low.
Yeah. Real quick, before we talk more Showdown, I want to answer this question because I feel like I probably should have brought it up already. Albert, we can't give out specific Pick 6 plays. Reason being, remember that the payouts are tied to how we all do. And so if we all played the same Pick 6 lineup and we hit, we'd all get like an 8x payout, and we'd absolutely hate it. So what we do instead with Pick 6 is we just talk about general stories that you can tell in your Pick 6 entry, and then it's up to you to take the core of 3 or 4 picks that we gave out and kind of finish it that way. With that, Prop, let's talk more Showdown. Do you have a favorite captain for tonight's slate?
I was thinking, I want to say Garrett Wilson if I was making a captain.
I like the Garrett Wilson call. That was honestly my first thought. And we not to reiterate the same thing over and over, but we've already talked about how Garrett Wilson has been heavily targeted even since Adams came to town, and he's been the more efficient of the two. I remember Jeff Ratcliffe was talking about this too when this trade first happened, but so many people immediately had like the gut reaction of, oh no, Garrett Wilson shares are completely sunk now because Adams is going to steal all of this production. But I think instead what we're seeing is Wilson was so easy for defenses to focus on before Adams came to town, and now he's kind of getting freed up. So even if we do see a decline in some usage, in some target share, we should continue to see this kind of boost in efficiency. And I think one thing that really stands out to me, just look at the longest reception he has had in each game this season. 16, 26, 9, 23, 16, 24. Adams comes to town 27 and 35. So immediately we're seeing he's getting freed up down the field a little bit more, some room for more explosive plays. And that's the type of thing that makes for a great captain, that long touchdown, those explosive plays. So I like this Wilson captain call quite a bit. How do you feel about it, too, then?
Yeah, I don't really have a favorite captain. I have more like favorite plays. Mm-hmm. Like I like using the defenses, especially the Jets defense, because I think the Jets are going to force the Texans to throw the ball, which gives the Jets defense an opportunity to score points. So I like the defenses, especially the Jets defense. It's like the Jets, I'm so indifferent between them that I don't like any of them much more than the others. And I like Dalton Schultz as a captain. So those are the ones I kind of like. Jets defense, Dalton Schultz, Mechie, if you really want to have like a bunch of studs in there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will say from the Sims, one captain option that I really like is CJ Stroud, where we have him as one of the stronger leverage captains. And I think I like this in large part because I'm always looking for captain options that fit the overall build. And I trust the Sims when they're saying that we should be heavy on Texans. And if the idea is the Texans 5-1 works because Stroud spreads out the ball, well, that also means that Stroud is more likely to be the optimal captain instead of one of his receiving options. So something like Stroud captain with Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz and John Mechie, I think works really, really well. And then it also saves enough money to bring it back with at least one of those Jet studs. So I think at the moment, that's probably my preferred build for Showdown. How do you feel about that prop?
Well, what was the last one? What was the last option?
So it would be CJ Stroud as the captain with, let's say, Mechie, Dell, and Schultz. So we're getting all the receiving options that the three of us seem to like on the Houston side. And that means that you get to bring it back with, one of the Jet studs, and you can do whatever the hell else you want with that last spot. But just the idea of the Stroud captain with the spread out passing production where it's right. Because if you're using Stroud, like one of the dangers of a Stroud captain is there are going to be lots of Tank Dell lineups, Tank Dell captain lineups. So even if you have Dell in your lineup as a flex, like one thing you don't want is for Stroud to throw 3 touchdowns, but Dell has 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, because now you're pretty much sunk relative to any Tank Dell captain lineups. So if you're going to the Stroud captain lineup, you probably want that production spread out. Dalton Schultz catches a touchdown. Mechie has 5 receptions for 50 yards. Tank Dell has 80 yards and a touchdown, but he hasn't done enough to pass Stroud as the captain. So how do you just feel about that kind of build style in general?
I like that because I feel like you kind of get the best of both worlds with that type of lineup. It's funny you mentioned the Mechie thing because I laddered his receptions after I looked into it a little bit more.
I like that. We have this question here. You don't think Mixon steals the show? It's not that we don't think that Mixon does. It's that we think that enough people are saying, oh, man, like all of the receivers are gone from Houston, so it's either going to be Tank Dell or I can just ignore the receivers as a whole and say all the production goes to Mixon. So it's more that we just all kind of feel like Mixon's going to be overowned, and so we're hoping he doesn't steal the show more so than we're expecting him not to. All right. Any final Showdown thoughts here, TwoGun? Maybe any other cheap names that you like that we haven't touched on, like Mechie?
Not really. I definitely could see the Texans, Kaimi Fairbairn being way overowned.
Mm-hmm.
Partly because people are lazy and don't want to see which Jets kicker it is, and partly because people overown kickers. So I really don't like Kaimi Fairbairn. Also because I like CJ Stroud a lot, and you really should avoid pairing a kicker with a quarterback unless it's like a 5-1 beatdown.
Yeah. I've got one. Prop, I'll ask you this first. How do you feel about Braylon Allen? Because I can say, as somebody who lost a 6-pick touchdown play over an underdog last week because Braylon Allen vultured Breece Hall, How do you feel about Braylon Allen here, kind of hoping that he vultures him again? And obviously, Breece Hall will be one of the most popular plays on the slate.
I'm right there with you. I tailed my guy Wave on a touchdown lay. I think we had like 10 or 11 people. We only missed about 2 people, and one of the guys was Breece Hall. And when they got to the 1 yard line, I just knew that that Breece was going to get into the end zone, and they give it to Braylon Allen. So,
and I think they gave it to Breece on the first play too. He didn't get in. They were like, "All right, Braylon, you go and you get it done." I was shocked to see that, and yeah, that I think it cost me like a good $2,500. So I was not happy to see it either.
Yeah. So is your question like, do I see it happening again? Pretty much, like, would I be scared of that?
Not even necessarily. Do you expect it to happen again? But do you just think that Braylon Allen is a good enough play at $4,400 in Showdown? Not necessarily because you expect like him to have a nice game, but because when he has a nice game, he's often going to be leveraging one of the most popular plays in the slate in Breece Hall.
Man, I'm not sure, because I feel like if you're getting him at that, and again, I don't do the DFS much. Wouldn't you pretty much need him to score to be
probably? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would want to risk it with him.
I think my thought is I like the concept. I just hate the price. He's $4,400. We have Hutchinson, Mike Williams, Robert Woods, John Mechie, Ogunbowale, Gibson, all of these guys cheaper. So I guess my concern is, like, let's say Braylon Allen does what he did last week and he does score and gives you 9.2 DraftKings points again. I'm not sure that's going to be good enough, because I think Mechie might beat that. I think Robert Woods might beat it. Is that your thought too, TwoGun?
I just don't like his ceiling. He's not Tyrone Tracy. He's the clear running back number 2 on a team that isn't like that run happy. He doesn't really have much of a pass, a role in the passing game, especially now that they have Devontae Adams. I just don't like his ceiling, so I don't like it.
It's also interesting because in weeks 2 and 3, it almost looked like he was going to be like a 1B to Breece Hall's 1A, and the usage just hasn't been there since. He did get a bunch of carries last week, but only one target in the last 2 weeks combined. So I don't know where that 7 targets combined in weeks 3 and 4 went, but it doesn't seem to be there anymore. So I think I'm with you guys here. All right. I know we haven't spent a ton of time researching the main slate yet, but I want to ask each of you, if you have been able to look, Prop, not even necessarily a DFS question here, but what offenses are you excited for this coming Sunday that you just think have a chance to put up a ton of points?
The Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders.
I like that. How about you, TwoGun?
I did look at it a little bit, and assuming he doesn't get steamed a lot, my first guy I really like is Tyreek Hill. He did it last week as Mega Chalk. The Dolphins are going to have to throw it to keep up with the Bills.
Yeah.
He's 7,300, which means he may end up being super chalky. So let's wait and see where the ownership and all this stuff. But if he ends up being sub 15% ownership, I think he's going to have a high GPP score, and I'm going to want to have him in like half my lineups.
Yeah, I like that call. I will bring up CeeDee Lamb at $8,800. Kind of a similar thought. My first run of ownership just kind of says that none of these expensive receivers are going to be able to separate from an ownership perspective because there are so many of them in at least decent spots. And Lamb at the most expensive, all the way up at $8,800, even coming off a massive game, 31 targets in the last 2 weeks, which is just nuts. But Dallas can't run the ball. So how much should we expect them to, try to commit to the run? And Atlanta has been just kind of the perfect matchup for a guy with CeeDee Lamb's skill set. They do a good job of taking away deep balls and explosive plays, but that's not how Lamb is producing. He's producing by getting open underneath, a lot of yards after the catch type stuff, like 13 receptions, 146 yards. He hasn't been over 13 yards per reception in either of the last 3 games. So it's very I think Lamb's role is very reminiscent of Rashee Rice's role, and Rashee Rice just torched Atlanta. Atlanta, even without giving up those explosive plays, they have been a phenomenal matchup for opposing wide receiver ones. The third most favorable, plus 41%. So if I had to give a potential slate breaker, I think it'd be CeeDee Lamb right now. Sounds like you guys kind of on board with the CD explosion coming.
You can't of course, like CD Lamb, of course he can break a slate. Let's see where he ends up being. I think a lot of it depends on how much value there's on the slate. Because if there's not much value, then you're right. Like I see Tyreek Hill being way more chalky than CeeDee Lamb because price. And there's something on my head. You mean you're talking about my ears?
Honestly, I can't believe we got through the whole show taking you seriously. This is very very fun. I appreciate you once again, PropGod, for joining us. I
did have I do my my route tree every week where I pretty much target receivers based on our wide receiver cornerback matchup tool, and I pull the notes from StatHub for them. So number 1 this week is AJ Brown, actually. So I know you mentioned CeeDee Lamb.
Yep.
I kept CD off. I might end up still betting on him this week, but AJ Brown was my favorite receiver. He has a 99.9 rating this week. I'll share that one with the rest of them. Yeah. And number 2 was Terry McLaurin, and then I like Josh Downs as well, especially with Flacco.
I love Downs. Yep. I love Downs with Flacco. It's like I don't necessarily think that the move to Flacco makes a ton of sense, but I do think from a fantasy perspective, it is as good of an upgrade as it could possibly be for Josh Downs, in large part just because the pass rate should be so much higher with Flacco. And obviously Flacco and Downs have kind of already established a pretty nice connection. So I love the Downs call. I wish that they were on the main DraftKings slate, but they are on the main FanDuel slate. So if you're playing there, make sure you're loading up on some Josh Downs. Any closing thoughts here, TwoGun?
No.
Prop, are you live again tonight for your betting show?
Yeah, I'm about to go live right now. As soon as we
Beautiful. All right, so make sure you go check that out, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. We will catch you next time.
Bye.